We're going to be talking about just some stuff you need to keep in mind when you're shopping for a bow. When you're buying a bow, we're going to talk Elite, we're going to talk Mathews, we're going to talk Hoyt, we're going to talk Bowtech, PSC, Prime by G5. All these brands we're going to cover in a most neutral and unbiased stance that we can take.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode driven by our friends over at Ridge Rock Hunt Company. We'll talk more about them when we conclude at the end. I'm Sam Thrash, your Fall Obsession Podcast host. Thanks for tuning in. Back on here again with my good buddy, our media production manager, Nick Powell. What's happening, buddy?
Hey, nothing much, Sam. What's up?
Oh, not much. We're jumping back on here, and for the first time in podcast history, we're re-recording an episode. Kind of sucks, but
yeah, there was a lot of good info in that first one, but we'll be able to reiterate it for sure.
Yeah. So to give you guys an idea, we actually recorded this podcast last week. We had our first ever true equipment failure, I would say, with our equipment, and we didn't catch it until everything was all said and done. We were packed up. So it ended up costing us a podcast last week, but we're getting back on here. We're dishing this one out, trying to knock it out, and that is buying a bow in 2022. That's what we're going to talk about. And I do think it's kind of bittersweet re-recording this one, Nick, because as we already talked about, I feel like we're able to kind of fine-tune our conversation from last time and really peel back into the truly relevant information that was in the last one. But needless to say, guys, today we're going to be talking about just some stuff you need to keep in mind when you're shopping for a bow. When you're buying a bow, we're going to talk Elite, we're going to talk Mathews, we're going to talk Hoyt, we're going to talk Bowtech, PSC, Prime by G5. All these brands we're going to cover in a most neutral and unbiased stance that we can take. This podcast is for you guys and simply to give y'all an idea of what's out there and what you might like to go try. So with that, we're going to dive in. I will say, obviously Nick and I are bow hunters and we are shooting bows now as it is right now. So we're both shooting Elite, have been for a few years. I'm running the Cure from 2020. Nick's got the Ritual 33 from a year before that. We both really do enjoy our bows. We're both always, I feel like, interested in what the latest and greatest is and what's out there. Obviously haven't upgraded in a couple years, but Elite, just because that's where we have background experience. We're not trying to push them in this podcast. We're not trying to promote them to you guys, but we are going to start there just because that's what Pal and I are most familiar with as of today. So starting with what Elite has rolled out for their new 2022 lineup. In their main line, their flagship line, which price point, guys, I know money's a thing for everybody out there in the archery world, but price point, you're looking at that kind of $1,000 to $1,300 range with all of the flagship bows that we're gonna talk about in this podcast from all these different brands. It could be right at that 1,000 mark. It could be close to that 1,300 mark or somewhere in between. Not saying it's one or the other, but we're just kind of generalizing it to kind of help the episode flow a little bit better. Anyway, the Elite Envision, their new flagship, it is in that price point. I'm going to read off the stats to this bow, and we're probably going to get off on a couple rabbit trails talking about certain stats and why they're relevant. We're going to kind of hit those rabbit trails early on, and as we kind of work our way and finish our way out in the episode, it'll move a little bit quicker. But the Elite Envision, it's 31 inches axle to axle, which that axle to axle number refers to, it's pretty self-explanatory, the axle of your top cam and the axle of your bottom cam and the distance between the two. 31 inches. This bow in particular has an adjustable draw length module, so you don't have to switch mods like you would with Mathews or Hoyt. You can actually slide the module. It's adjustable from 23.5 to 30.5 inches for your draw length. 334 feet per second is what it's rated for, and the let off is adjustable from 70% to 90%. And I know that's one rabbit trail, Nick, when we recorded this last time that we got off on, was that let off, and I want to get back on that trail because I think it actually is pretty relevant and pretty important. Because guys are asking, first off, what is let off? If you're a novice archer, if you're a nervous archer, you might want to know what it is too. But I mean,
that's true.
I'm nervous every time I go bow hunting. If you're a novice archer, you might not quite understand what let off means. So when you're drawing your bow back, let's say you shoot a 70-pound bow. When you're drawing that bow back and you're at the peak of that draw cycle, you're going to be pulling around that 70 pounds. But eventually you're going to feel that bow roll over into the valley, and then you're going to hit the back wall. And when you're at full draw against that back wall, you are not holding 70 pounds. You're holding a much lighter weight, obviously. That way you can actually, aim and execute your shot. So let off, when you look at that number, that 70 to 90%, it refers to the difference between your full weight draw and then where you're at when you're at full draw. So if you're shooting a 70-pound bow, when you come to full draw, you're only holding 10% of that total draw weight that you're pulling back. The other 90% has quote-unquote let off. So that kind of gives you guys an idea. And some people might ask, well, why would you want to hold more weight? Why would you want to set at 70 instead of 90? Some people like to be holding more weight at full draw because it helps them with their shot execution. When you're at full draw, traditionally what is taught is you want to pull your way through your shot. That helps you with your follow through. You want to come to full draw and squeeze through your shot, pull back through your shot, and that's what allows you to have more accuracy, especially at longer range. It's just developing good habits is what it is. So for some people that might be struggling with that, a 70 and 80% let off might be more beneficial to them as they're trying to develop those good habits instead of the 90. Some people just prefer to be beasts and hold more weight. Like, some people are just wired that way. And then obviously if you have good habits and you're comfortable with your follow through, that 90% can be very therapeutic for you. So something to keep in mind there. So kind of these stats, these are again, what the Elite Envision is set at. A lot of these bows that we're going to talk about in this kind of mainline area are going to be pretty close to this. The 31-inch, really the 30 to 33-inch axle range is what a lot of mainstream bows are running right now for their flagship line. As far as the ATA, honestly, the 335 to about the 345 feet per second rating is pretty common, and that's what you're going to find. I'll speak to feet per second real quick, just so that you guys are familiar. That rating is tested at the factory, and it is bare bones. They have stripped that bow down and tuned that bow specifically so that they can get as much as they possibly can out of it. That's what they have done with that bow. So you running a heavier arrow for hunting, having a peep sight on your bow, a D-loop, all the different things accessories that you might put on your bow, it can take away from that factory feet per second rating, which basically I'm saying you're never going to see that number. For example, my Cure is rated at 340 something. I don't even remember the exact number, but that's the factory rating. 70 pounds, 29 and a 1/4 inch draw, and a 435 grain arrow, I'm shooting right at 300 flat, which is comfortable for me. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm happy with that. I've been living with that for 3 years. But that just goes to show I'm never going to see that 340 number out of my bow, essentially. So before we move on from Elite, one more thing that I will mention that is really just specific to them, or two things essentially. One is their set technology. The set technology is basically a screw that is on the back side of your riser that runs into your limb pocket and adjusts the angle that your limbs are sitting in the limb pocket. This takes out the need for cam tuning. If you're into the Bowteching world, and you can kind of relate with me here for a minute, your cam lean traditionally in the past has been a big factor and something you got to play with in order to tune your bow properly to the shooter. With the set technology, Elite has taken out the need for a bow press and for taking cables off and putting twists in, taking twists out to adjust your cam lean. They have created a system that just with a quarter turn of an Allen key can change your bullet hole going through paper and make it all the more better for you. So another cool feature that they have. The other thing I mentioned, I'm a 29 1/4 inch draw. I don't want guys to be thinking, oh, this freaking guy, you know, he can't be 29 or 29 and a half. He's got to be 29 1/4. You know, what a jerk. It's not the case, guys. It's not the case. Elite actually makes their bows to adjust in 1/4 inch increments, which is just another tool that allows a shooter to tune that bow specifically for them. And honestly, like, people are going to think I sound picky. I am picky, but I've shot bows at 29 inches. I've shot bows at 29 and a half inches in the past. And I didn't know how uncomfortable it was until I shot a 29 1/4. And it was absolute money. It was like that bow was built specifically for me. So even that 1/4 inch draw length increment adjustment ability, that can make a huge difference if you're really looking for an exact fit in a bow. So something to think about. Just so you guys are aware, previous Elite models, like before 2020, like the Ritual that Nick's running, those are mod specific draw length adjustments. So it's the actual piece in the cam that has to come out and be swapped. 2020 is when they started doing this rotating modules with the 1/4 inch increments. So something to keep in mind just if you're shopping for an older or used bow. The last thing I'll talk about Elite and kind of summarize again for all these brands. We're talking these Elite bows have been the flagship line, which there's the Elite Envision and there's the Elite Terrain. Pretty comparable stats. The Elite Terrain's a little bit longer axle, which in turn is going to take away a little bit of speed. But again, it's just a different bow. It'll fit you differently, be more comfortable for somebody if you prefer a longer axle bow. All of these manufacturers also have a kind of a midline bow, kind of a economical one for somebody if you're balling on a budget. These bows are typically going to be in the $600 to the $900 range. $600 is pretty low, and even in recent years, there hasn't been a midline bow that's been in that price range. Elite has one now, the Elite Basin, 32 inches axe to axle, 16 to 30 inch draw length, 315 feet per second. And it's adjustable. I didn't write this down. I forgot to in my notes, but it is adjustable from like 25 pounds to a 60 or 70 pound draw. So if you are looking to get into a bow or get a new bow for cheap, the Elite Basin or these other ones in this midline from these other manufacturers that we'll talk about, these are the bows that you guys should maybe look into, because you can essentially get them set up out the door with arrows and a release for under $1,000, which is pretty hard to do with a flagship bow these days. So the Elite Basin, $599 price tag on it. Go check it out. Nick, you got anything else you want to touch on with Elite before we move on to some of these other bows?
Yeah, I'll add. You were talking about the terrain and how it's built for kind of a taller guy or a guy with a long draw length. But you also mentioned that it's you're going to give up some speed
right
due to that. But I just want to let the listeners know that you're not giving up enough speed that's going to make a difference while you're in the field. So they're both rated for over 325 feet per second. The Envision is 334. The Terrain's at 325. So you're only giving up 9 feet per second in your arrow speed. So it's not like it's a huge difference in speed. So I wouldn't count out the Terrain for if it's a more comfortable bow for you.
So I'll speak to that not just with Elite, but this is applicable to every brand that we're going to talk about today. And that is the ultimate test to know which one you need to go for, and we'll touch on this again at the end, but the ultimate test is simply going and shooting them for yourself and finding out what works for you, because there's going to be some speed demons that listen to this podcast and probably knock on Nick for what he just said. They're like, oh, speed does matter. I only buy bows if they're rated at 350, whatever, man. go ahead, more power to you.
That's
But the
fine.
way technology is, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to talk bad about guys that want the speed, because there are environments. I'll say this: there are environments to that need that speed. If you're hunting big, like true big game, yeah, you're gonna want more power. But if you're hunting in North America, in the United States, man, any bow that's rated in the 330s, 340s, if it's set up right for you and you're not running a ridiculously heavy arrow, you're gonna be just fine. So unless it is a big deal to you, I wouldn't, like Nick said, I wouldn't get too hung up on the speed. The other thing, a theory that I'll debunk, and I remember this from our last conversation, another rabbit trail we got off on, was the ground blind concept with axe to axle. You know, traditionally in the past, a lot of guys have been like, oh man, I hunt in ground blinds. I need small axe to axle bows. I need compact, that way I can get in there and move around. Guys, I've never owned a bow in my life that was shorter than 32 inches axle to axle. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to correct myself right there. I shot a bow 1 year that was 28. So I can say that I've experienced the short axle to axle bow. But with the exception of that 1 year, every bow I've had has been 32 or more. And I have never once experienced an issue with my top cam hitting the top of my ground blind. If you're in your blind properly, you should be toward the back where you're less visible, in which case when you're at full draw, your bow will be at a more central location anyway in the blind, which is the highest point, as we all know. So the whole concept of you need short to hunt in a ground blind, I want to debunk that theory, because that's not accurate in my opinion. I have shot a short axle bow apparently 1 year in a ground blind. I did kill an antelope with that bow out of a ground blind too, as a matter of fact. But I've also killed plenty of deer with a 33-inch axle bow in a ground blind and never had an issue. So it really, like I said, guys, it comes down to what's comfortable for you. If you are if you have a longer draw length, if you're a taller guy, I definitely recommend a longer axle bow. That's going to help you with keeping, basically just with your accuracy. You're going to have less knock pinch. Your string angle is going to be a better fit for you, especially at longer distances. You're going to be more consistent. So something to think about if you have a longer draw length yourself. But anyway, I just wanted to address that before we move on. So next on the list, Mathews Archery. Again, guys, I'm not going to read stats to y'all, but everything is pretty comparable across the board in that axle range, as well as the feet per second range. Mathews this year has their V3X. It's in a 29 and a 33-inch model. Again, those numbers refer to the axle. Speed is comparable, but this is their flagship line. We all know about Mathews, and they're a big name in the industry. I'll be honest with you, I've shot this bow. I love this bow. It's a straight shooting bow, very smooth. And if you got the money to drop on a bow, it's definitely one you should try and see what you think. One thing I will speak to with their V3X, something new that Mathews did this year, was they started this new technology where you can integrate your dovetail bow sight into the riser of the bow, which is a really neat concept. It keeps the weight of those heavier sights more centrally located in the bow, so it's not more on the outside of your bow with a bracket. Mathews advertises 3 brands of sights being ideal for this bow, and forgive me, I didn't write them down. You guys can go to their website and look them up. What I've been told by our friends over at our local bow shop is that almost any dovetail sight will fit into these bows, but there are select dovetail sights, and they didn't even tell me which ones, that are not a tight fit. They have a little bit of wiggle room in there even when they're all the way cinched down. I'm of course not a fan of that. I need everything tight, no room for error. So if I did in theory get one of these bows, I would have to put a bracket on the outside. I would not want to take that chance. So just something to think about, something to pick your local Bowtech's brain about if they've had a chance to play around with these bows a little bit. So the V3X, it's very similar to last year's V3. So you guys can keep that in mind, but it has like that integrated dovetail system. It does have a few new features available to it. Mathews also has their Atlas, which is another flagship bow in that same price point. It's just kind of catered a little bit more to those longer draw length guys, offered in a little bit longer axle to axle, higher feet per second, all the way up at 350. So if you want speed or you're a taller guy, that might be a bow that's a good fit for you. Another one to check out. Mathews does have a midline bow in the price point category. Their Mathews Tactic. It's valued at $849 MSRP. 30.5 inches axle to axle, 7-inch brace height, and 335 feet per second. So again, if speed means something to you, that is 20 feet per second faster than that Elite. It's also about $250 more. So not saying one's better than the other, just stating facts. So Nick, you got anything on Mathews you'd like to talk about?
I was going to add what the sight companies were with that bridge lock technology.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's Excel Sights, Spot Hog, and...
While Nick's looking at that too, guys, one other thing that I will touch on, and this will become pretty relevant or just with an interesting fact that one manufacturer's doing at the very end of our list here when we get to it, but I'll touch on a little bit now, is brace height. Haven't really talked about that yet. What brace height refers to is the distance between the back of the grip on the bow and your string. And traditionally with a bow, let's say we have two bows that are 33 inches axle to axle. One has a 6-inch brace height and the other has a 7-inch brace height. The 6-inch brace height bow is going to be faster than the 7-inch brace height bow. The shorter the brace height, the faster the bow. That's how technology traditionally works. So just something to keep in mind. Longer brace heights will also be a little bit more forgiving for a shooter. So it's kind of, again, pick your poison. Do you value the speed? Do you value the forgiveness? What are you looking for in a bow? Just something to keep in mind when you're shopping around and reading this stat on these bows that's brace height. That's what it's referring to. So, did you find out, Nick?
Yeah, it looks like it's Excel, Spot Hog, Black Gold, and it looks like CBE has one that will fit it. That's compatible as well.
Okay, very cool. So a lot of the big name bow sight manufacturers out there will fit in that Mathews bridge lock system. So keep that in mind, guys. And again, I'll say on that too, if you have a sight that's not one of those brands, that sight can still mount to the bow with the traditional bracket side mount that we all have known and loved for decades. This is just an additional option if you run a dovetail sight for one of those brands. So, all right, moving forward. Next, we have Hoyt Archery. Again, I'm not going to just read stats for stats. These are very comparable stats to everything else, but Hoyt has their Ventum Pro in a 30 and a 33-inch axle-to-axle bow. They also have their Carbon RX7 and RX7 Ultra. Very similar stats to the Ventum Pro 30 and 33, but you're buying a carbon bow. So now we're jumping outside of that $1,000 to $1,300 price tag range, and now we're getting up toward the $2,000 price tag range with those carbon bows. So some guys really like those carbon bows. I have actually, years and years ago, I shot a Hoyt carbon bow, and it was a really good bow. Obviously, they're lightweight, and zero hand shock or vibration is in theory what you're supposed to experience in those bows. So some guys, that's just what you get. It might be what you've gotten for years, or maybe you're looking to try something different. I myself am a fan of a heavier bow, an aluminum riser, and you can ask Nick. I run 2 stabilizers on my hunting rig, a front and a back bar, and I put some weight on them. Like, my bow is pretty weighted down, and that's simply because if you compare it to a rifle hunter who's or just a marksman in general who's trying to shoot longer range or something, and I'm not a gun guy, guys. I'll preface it with that. I might be saying all this stuff all wrong here, but from what I understand, with a heavier barrel, it's going to provide you with more accuracy. Is traditionally what I understand, to briefly summarize it in the firearm world. Similar with a bow. Yes, in my opinion, there is a point that you get to having a too heavy bow. But I like to weight mine down a little bit. I feel like it helps me settle on my target better, helps me with my follow through, and definitely helps me with those longer range shots. So, something to think about. If you are looking to shoot longer range, not saying that the carbon bows can't work for you, but if you haven't tried a heavier bow, that might be something to think about. Or again, pick the brain of your local Bowtech. So Hoyt has those Ventum Pros and the Carbon RX7s in the RX7 and the RX7 Ultra. Hoyt also in their midline has the Hoyt Tour-X is their most popular one this year, an $800 price tag. 30 and 3/4 inch axle, 7-inch brace height, 327 feet per second. So on the speed, it's kind of splitting the difference there between the Elite and the Mathews. Again, an affordable bow that you guys can get into for cheap. A lot of these manufacturers also have an RTS or a ready to shoot package that you can put on these midline bows for an extra $100 or $150. Comes with a basic simple quiver, rest, sight, and stabilizer. So essentially you tack an extra $100 onto your price tag, and all you need is arrows and a release, and you're good to go. So if you're buying it from a dealer, brand new, something to think about, something to ask. Hey, especially if you're on a budget, hey, do you guys have a ready to shoot package that you can slap on that bow for me? So something to think about. And I know we're moving kind of fast now at this point, guys. The rest of this is going to finish out pretty quick in this episode, but it's because we're, like I mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of covering some of the concepts behind why some of this information is relevant. We're covering that as we move through the episode, and it's relevant to all brands. So Nick, anything else you want to summarize with Hoyt?
No, you hit the nail on the head there, bud.
Cool. And I will say too, guys, again, applicable to all these, we are not naming off every bow that these manufacturers are currently making or that is available this year. We're hitting the high points. We're hitting the ones that everybody has heard about, that everybody's talking about, and that are the best sellers. Hoyt has a lot of other bows in their lineup. Mathews has a few more, Elite has a few more, and some manufacturers even have previous year's models that they're still making or still selling. Another thing to think about too, a little tip for you guys, is most of the time, from my understanding, whenever a bow goes to a dealer, like your local pro shop, if it's brand new for this year, the price is what the price is. That pro shop's normally not allowed to mark that bow down anymore. But after the first year, or after the next lineup comes out, manufacturers, from my understanding, can start marking those bows down a little bit. So again, if you guys are looking for a budget and you're not necessarily hooked on the latest and greatest from this year, you might ask your local dealer if they have anything available from last year. So, and it might be a little bit cheaper for you. So that being said, this next one we're going to talk about briefly actually has the most current bows that they're manufacturing, I feel like, and that's Bowtech. There's almost, I didn't even really count them, but it's like 10 or 12 bows that they are currently manufacturing and producing, which is a pretty high number right now.
Yeah, they got quite a bit.
Yeah. So key ones that I'll point out, I'm just going to touch on 3 real quick. Bowtech SR350, again, comparable stats in regards to axle and brace height, all that jazz. 350 feet per second, so a little bit faster, a little bit more zip to it. Bowtech has always had a bow with a little bit more to offer in the speed world, it seems like. They also have their CP28. Again, comparable stats, guys, comparable information, but that 28 is referring to a 28-inch axle bow, so this bow is very small, very compact. So something to think about if you are a shorter guy, or if you're stuck on that, I need a short bow to hunt in a ground blind theory, and you don't care what I have to say, well, you can go buy you a Bowtech CP28. So not that my word is the end-all be-all. This is my opinion. I know that there's varying opinions out there, so. In their midline, Bowtech also has the Carbon Zion. This bow is extremely light. It's lighter than the Hoyt Carbons. It's $800, so if you're looking for a carbon bow for cheap, there you go. $800 get you in one right now, and I think that Bowtech does offer a ready-to-shoot package. Don't quote me on that though. Adjustable draw length from 25.5 to 30.5 inches, 31 inches axle, and 335 on the speed. So guys, another thing to think about with these midline bows, pretty much every single one of them has a huge swing in draw length. It has a huge swing in draw weight. It's around the 30-inch axle ballpark and in that 330-ish category. The reason they do that is so it can work for anybody. If you're a grown man and you want a bow for cheap, it'll fit you. If you have a teenage son who's growing every year and you want a bow that can grow with him, these kind of bows will work for you. Even if you have a daughter or a wife that's wanting to get into it, these bows can work for them. We're not talking about women's bows in this podcast, but all these manufacturers have a bow specifically designed for female shooters as well. So another thing to think about if you're trying to get the wife into bow hunting, Nick.
We're working on it.
So anyway, Bowtech, those are just 3 of Bowtech's many bows that they have to offer. Again, I would recommend you guys go in and check them out at your dealer or looking them up on their website to see the full lineup and see what kind of stats all these different bows have, because it would take me way too long to go through all that right now. So, all right, next on the list we have PSC Archery. Again, another manufacturer that has a lot of bows in their lineup. Stats comparable, guys. This is why I'm not reading stats off. I know it seems like I'm breezing through these, but there's no need for me to read the same thing over and over again. PSC has their Pro series, which has a carbon hunting line, very lightweight bows. Has a Pro Evo hunting line, which are their aluminum risers, and it also has the Knock On hunting line, which is basically John Dudley's way of getting a little bit of money off of a PSC bow stale with some lime green accessories on it. I don't hate John Dudley, guys. I have no problem with the guy, but I mean, that's what's happening there. I mean, we can all see it. So they also have their Core series, which again is in that economical lower price point, the $600 to $900 range. There's the Brute and the Stinger, to name 2 in particular. These bows have been around for a while, but they've made upgrades and improvements to them. So some bows that you guys can check out if you're looking for a price point. Last manufacturer I'm going to hit, and I know I'm moving fast, but we got a time constraint today, but is Prime. It's made by G5. I put these guys in the top 6. These manufacturers that we've talked about today are in my top 6. And the reason is they are really good bows. They shoot very smooth, very efficient, comparable in the speed world and all the other statistics. Traditionally in the past, their claim to fame has been their 2-track cam system, which if you look them up, it's basically like on top and bottom, it's 2 cams that are parallel to each other. This is supposed to provide like an exact tune, no room for cam lean, no margin for error, exact and precise shooting basically. This year is the first year that Prime went away from that and came out with their Inline series, which guess what that is, guys? It's a normal bow is what it is. They did away with their 2-track cam systems, and now they have a normal inline, as they call it, bow, offered in a 31, 32, and 33-inch axle. Again, stats comparable, but one thing I found interesting with these is that the longer the ATA, the axle to axle, gets, the shorter that they have made their brace height, which normally manufacturers go the other way. That with longer axles, they put a longer brace height. Prime went the other way, put a shorter brace height, and it basically makes all 3 of their bows, their different lengths, run the same speed, like within 1 to 2 feet per second of each other. So kind of interesting, something that they tried there. I can talk about them all day and how smooth they shoot, but the ultimate test with any of these guys is going to be going to your local dealer and shooting them for yourself. That's the best thing that you guys can do to find a bow that best fits you. So that's always our recommendation. We at Fall Obsession are always here to answer questions or provide content like this podcast. We've got a bunch of videos over the years on our channel. to try and help you guys out, but the ultimate test is going to your local shop, shooting them all if you're not brand biased, and seeing what works best for you. That's what you need to do. So, Nick, have I missed anything?
I don't think so, man. All of my notes have been checked off, so
Cool.
you're doing a great job.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, guys, we're going to keep it on the shorter end of our podcast episodes this week. Just want to give you guys an idea on some of the stuff that's out there if you are buying a bow in 2022. Hope this podcast wasn't completely boring for you guys. Hope you guys got a little bit of good information out of it. I nerd out on the archery stuff, guys. I could go into way more detail, talk about this all day long. Nick can tell you. I get going and I don't ever stop. So that being said, if you guys have any questions, if there's anything you think that I should have talked about in this podcast that we didn't, shoot us at Fall Obsession a message, comment below, whatever it might be, and let me know, and I'll jump on there and start a discussion, and we'll get it figured out together. Or obviously go consult your local pro shop. That being said, if you guys haven't already, hit that follow and subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. We are on all major podcast platforms, as well as our website, fallobsession.com, and our YouTube channel. We're putting out multiple new videos on that YouTube channel every single week, so be sure you subscribe to that as well. Traditionally, what we've been doing every week also is a podcast video. With this being a re-recording and Nick and I trying to knock it out pretty quick, there is no video for this podcast episode, but we plan on next week being back on that video train for you guys. So don't be looking for a video on this one. fallobsession.com, that's the hub. Educational articles, video series, wild game recipes, photos, other educational content. It's all on there, guys. Go check it out, explore around, see what we got. We got some Fall Obsession apparel on there for you guys. Right now, our t-shirts are marked down. We do not have a t-shirt on there, I don't think, for more than $7 right now. So t-shirts are cheap. We're trying to make some room for some new designs we're coming out with this fall, or not this fall, this spring. I'm getting my seasons mixed up there. So we're coming out with some new designs here in the next couple weeks. So trying to make some room. Help us make that room and pick up a Fall Obsession t-shirt for cheap. fallobsession.com/store. Finally, the last thing that I'll mention, we are coming up on episode 100 of our podcast here in just a few short weeks. And we're giving you guys a chance to be a part of that podcast with us by sending us your feedback, your suggestions, your questions, whatever it might be. Head on over to fallobsession.com/podcast, fill out the form on that page, and we will cover it with our administrative staff in episode 100 here, in, like I said, in a few weeks. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is the podcast sponsor, Derek and Lacey. They are good folks over there in Mississippi. They book hunts if you are looking for a vetted, trusted outfitter to schedule your next hunting adventure with. Go check out Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Derek will get you squared away with whatever and wherever and whenever you're looking to go on a hunt. So go check them out. We are trying to get them back on the podcast too, so hopefully you'll hear their voices on here in the next couple weeks. So, Nick, thanks for re-recording with me, buddy.
Yeah, man, anytime. Glad I was able to make it on.
Yeah, for sure. Glad we knocked it out. Guys, sorry that it took us a little bit to get this episode to you. Hope it was good for y'all, and we will catch you guys again next week for another Fall Obsession podcast episode. We'll catch you then.